If you search on YouTube about spinal health, you'll see a bunch of people talking about how spinal flexion is dangerous, how we need to be maintaining neutral at all times, and how we need to avoid flexion at all costs. But the problem with that is that if all we're doing is trying to avoid spinal flexion, we're going to lose any ability in flexion, we're going to lose our control of flexion, and we're going to be very, very, very weak if we ever end up in a position with lumbar spinal flexion. And we definitely don't want to be weak in flexion, we definitely don't want to be out of control of it, and we definitely don't want to have zero ability with it, because it is impossible to avoid flexion at all times. No matter what you do, you will end up at flexion at some point in your life, and I would much rather have people prepared to access flexion when they end up there. That doesn't mean that we're going to try to go willy-nilly into spinal flexion. That doesn't mean we're going to try to max out in spinal flexion, because if we do enter more flexion than we're prepared to handle, with more load than we're prepared to handle, it will be dangerous. But if we take our time and build ourselves up to gain more ability, to gain more control, to gain more strength in spinal flexion, that spinal flexion will become less dangerous when we do inevitably encounter it in life and as lifters. So these are my top 3 ways to enter spinal flexion, to begin to train it at a relatively low risk and at a relative ease of entry point. So let's run them. And the first place we're going to start is some variation of a reverse hyper type movement, because on a reverse hyper, when we're in the bottom in the most flexed position, there's going to be a relatively low amount of compression on the spine, meaning that it will be a relatively safe entry point for people that can be easily controlled. And if your gym doesn't have a reverse hyper, this one doesn't, I'll give you a couple options that you can do it on. The easiest one will be a GHR. We can get on the thing backwards, hold onto the foot plate, let our legs hang down, and from here, all we're going to do is try to lift our pelvis up as we squeeze our glutes, and then we're going to slowly control down into the bottom. If that is too gnarly at first, all you can do is try to let yourself hang, lift your pelvis up, keep the legs hanging, and do reps lifting the pelvis, letting the pelvis drop in a controlled manner. Now, if your gym doesn't have a GHR, you probably got one of these preacher benches. You can do the same thing here. It's a little sketchier because it's kind of trickier to manage position, but same thing. We're going to let ourselves hang. We're going to pull the legs up, pull the pelvis up, squeeze the glutes, come down in a controlled manner. And we're going to do reps like that until we get a mild back pump. Another option is to run them single-legged if doing them with both legs at the same time feels a little bit too sketchy. Don't force the range of motion. Don't be in a rush to make them super hard, make them super ballistic. Just ease into flexion, pull yourself out, ease in, pull yourself out. And as you get more comfortable easing in and pulling yourself out, your back will get stronger. And a good progression up from the bodyweight reverse hypers is going to be a bodyweight back raise, and it's really easy to run on one of these 45-degree benches. All we're going to do is get it set up so the pad is about at our hip height. We're going to start by trying to use our abs to curl ourselves down, creating a little bit of tension on the front side. That will help us learn to use our abs to control flexion. We're going to go down as far as we're comfortable, keeping that tension in the abs as we go. We're going to let ourselves hang. Then we're going to lead by squeezing our glutes and curl our way up to the top. And again, we're just going to do reps, easing into as much flexion as we feel safe doing, and then we're going to curl ourselves back up. Now, if this does feel too sketchy, a good way to ease into it would be to put a dowel rod or a post out in front of you. That way you can resist the motion with that dowel rod. I should probably grab one to demo it. Let me grab one to demo it. I don't have a dowel rod, but I have a tripod. We can put something out in front of it, use our arms to support ourselves, and we can give ourselves some assistance to ease in the motion and build up both control and confidence with it. And the next progression is going to be a seated good morning. Now, if we do a seated good morning like you see most of the time with the bar on the back, this is going to be really gnarly. We're going to have a lot of compression, a lot of shear in the bottom, and I definitely wouldn't recommend starting with a bar on your back. But if we start these loaded with a cable, the forward pull is going to make it a little bit easier on us because it's not jamming it into a flexion. It's kind of like easing our way, making it a little bit less compressive, and then we can control our way into the bottom, stop where we feel like we are getting to the end of our range, or we can work into a little bit of a stretch, and from there all we're going to do is curl our way back up to the top. And again, we're going to do reps, get a mild pump, try to gain a little bit of access, try to gain a little bit of control. And if we want to make these a little bit harder, we can even run them single arm, get a little bit of rotation in with the flexion. And if we want to make that one step harder, we can do it single arm, finish with a row to incorporate a little bit of lat into controlling the relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. So those are 3 good ways to begin building tolerance to spinal flexion. We gain access to it, we gain control of it, we get stronger with it. We're going to be more prepared to handle it as a lifter and in real life. And bottom line, is there risk to spinal flexion? absolutely if we do more than we're ready to handle. But if we start to build more tolerance to it, we're going to be more prepared to handle it, and that risk can be mitigated. If you guys need more help, hit those links below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good rest of your day.